But before we get into the history of it, would you mind just giving the audience kind of a 2 to 3 minutes just about yourself and introduce yourself, and then start introducing the city?
Of course, I'd love to. First of all, my name is Jake Williams, and I refer to myself as a child of the civil rights movement, or a product of the Jim Crowe South. Most of you will find amazing, but I'm the baby of 16 kids. I'm the baby of 16, yes. All of us was born at home by a midwife. And I tell all of my guests, as far as prenatal is concerned, my mother, the only prenatal care she had was to let the midwife know she was going to need her in 9 months. She picked cotton in the daytime, had the babies at night. So, as I said, I'm a product of the Jim Crowe South. I kind of look at things through a different lens. Being a black male in the Deep South, and I don't want to give a negative impression of the South. We are a great place to live, a great place to come and stay, or to visit, whatever you are. But there are certain things, being a black male growing up in America, just certain things I would know, I would instinctively know. But I picked cotton. We got paid 2 cents a pound. It was so hot. As you look down that row of cotton, you would see little figures in front of your face, and it was from the humidity of the South. And as kids, we said it was the monkey dancing in our face, making fun of us, because we was out in the hot sun picking cotton. But my mother set a goal for me. I had to pick 50 pounds of cotton every day. And I would come up short every day, 47, 48, 49 pounds of cotton. I have you to know I still got a whooping with a switch. You know, that's like out of a tree, a little long limb type thing. So I had some guests from Iowa or somewhere, and they told this story to them, and their little boys looking at each other strange, and their parents had to explain to them what a switch was. And then one of them went and got a switch and started chasing the other one around. But I could go on and on. As growing up, I grew up about 25 miles out of Montgomery in the rural, in a little place called Lowndes County, totally rural. I have you to know I never went to an integrated school. I was always in a segregated school, and that was even up through college, really. My county, Lowndes County, to this day, is a totally black school system. There are no whites in the school system. They all go to a private school. So, but this is where I came from, and this is part of who I am. I kind of believe you are a product of your environment. And I tell all of my guests, when I was growing up, I didn't know I could have been an air traffic controller or even a model or any of those things, because the only professional black people that I was exposed to was a preacher or a school teacher. So I went to college to be a teacher, so I'm a history teacher.
Amazing.
Yeah, but I'll be throughout the tour. Please ask questions. I'll try my best to answer them for you. Even now, be more than happy to answer your questions.
Thank you guys for participating in this. And Jake, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your history with us. I think it's so important that we're doing this tour with you, and that we get to benefit from the lens that you were able to show us, to allow us to step out of our own shoes for a second and step into, not that we could ever step into your shoes, but to understand a little bit and develop our own internal compassion, which is ultimately really, in my perspective, always the soul of what tourism is supposed to be about. It's about seeing things from other people's perspectives, changing yourself, and then hopefully going home and taking some of that change, and teaching it to other people so that they also have compassion for it.
Yes.
So, thank you. I'm really excited to do this tour. Why don't I get off the screen and we'll turn it and we'll get going and start exploring and showing the space that we're at.
Sounds great.
I'll stop yabbering away, guys. As we're going, please don't feel embarrassed to ask questions and to share and let us know that you're there. Your interactions will help let other people find this video, both as a live stream if you're watching it live with us. Thank you for being here. But also if you're watching this as a video later on. The interactions that we have now will help more people see it, even as video later on. So really, please You know, Marissa, thank you for saying, you know, it's impressive. Kristen, thank you for the stunned emoji. Joel, your wow. Those types of comments are great. And if you feel like you can talk to each other even and share things back and forth with the other audience members, that's great. Maggie says hello from Texas. Maggie's
hey,
cat.
Okay.
So that does a great deal of help to help us now and then also later on. And clearly, if you are watching this as playback or video later on, hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube and turn on the bell notification so you never miss it when we go live. And if you're watching on Facebook, please share this video. I promise you we will not embarrass you. If you've shared it to your friends and family, they'll be grateful for this experience later on, as well as comment. Hearts and thumbs are always nice, but I would rather you do an emoji of a heart or an emoji of a thumb and comment with that. That is what lets those crazy hamsters on the internet know that you are actually watching. All right, enough about that stuff. We're gonna get going. And Paul, thank you for the applauses. I'm gonna flip this. All right, and if you'll just give me 1 second to just adjust and get this thing back on again. Your guys' infinite patience is always so appreciated. As always, if I screw up anything technically today, it's my fault, not Jake's fault. And if we lose the stream, there's one place that we really want to take you through. If we do leave the stream, we will come back in again really quickly for you. Lisa Crawford, hi from an Aussie living in Southwest Alabama. That's pretty cool. Okay, well, enough about me and Steph. Jake, let's do it, huh?
Okay.
All right.
Well, again, I want to welcome everybody to the riverbanks of the Alabama River. We're in downtown Montgomery. This river here starts about a mile upstream. It's where two rivers out of the mountains of North Georgia, the Coosa and the Tallapoosa River, comes together and it forms the Alabama River, and it goes for approximately 400 miles to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, this river is important that we come here today because we're going to talk about, first of all, about the domestic slave trade. Montgomery was a major slave market during the slave trade. Reason being was that central Alabama is referred to as the Black Belt. And the Black Belt soil in the Black Belt is so rich till it produces so much content. There was a great need for a large number of enslaved people in this area. Now, right behind us here is the railroad. Now, both of these became very important in the domestic slave trade. Normally, they would get the enslaved people from the East Coast, bring them down here. They would chain them all together. And that journey of 500 to 600 miles would cause them to lose a lot of their cargo, enslaved people, to death, marching them 500 or 600 miles and change. So they came up with the idea, well, hey, let's just bring them on steamboats up the river or even use the railroad to get them to the market, and therefore they didn't lose any of their valuable cargo to death. Now, Montgomery and Alabama, let me say in general, during the 1820s, Alabama had an enslaved population of roughly about 20 to 30,000 enslaved people. But in 1860, the slave population in Alabama was over 435,000 enslaved people. And while the plantation owners did not want to give up their institution of slavery, I submit to you that the state of Alabama did not either. The state of Alabama in 1860, 67% of the general fund for the state of Alabama came from tax on slaves, because for every enslaved person you owned, you had to pay $2 tax to the state of Alabama. So 67% of the state general fund came from tax on slaves. So now, as I stated to you Montgomery in particular had the largest slave market in the South. The slave market here was larger than Vicksburg, Mississippi, or New Orleans, Louisiana. Again, because of the cotton production, all the cotton that we could produce, Europe, England would buy. So it was a very lucrative commodity for the Southern and the Southern slave owner. But now, we speak some more of the domestic slave trade. It got to the point whereas it was as profitable, the domestic slave trade was as profitable as cotton because of the fact that the plantation owner would designate certain black men to serve as dues. And those dues jobs were as soon as the black female had a baby, it was his job to impregnate her again. So the domestic slave trade really was very quite lucrative and quite profitable. And as I said, Montgomery was at the center of that. Now, when we talk about Montgomery, Alabama, we got to talk about a crossroad of history. So many things happened here in Montgomery where history came together here. When we talk about history in Montgomery, Alabama, we have to always think of the Confederacy. The Confederacy was formed here in Montgomery, Alabama. Abraham Lincoln was running for president of the United States, and he ran on the platform that he believed slavery was wrong. So when he got elected president, 7 states decided that, well, he's going to take away our slaves, and that's the backbone of our economy. So they decided they had to do something about it. So with South Carolina leading the way as the first state to vote for secession, followed by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. 7 states decided that they needed to have a meeting and decide what they was going to do about this. So they called a meeting and they said, well, let's meet midways. And the midways between South Carolina and Texas was Montgomery, Alabama. So they met here on in our state capital here in Montgomery, and they formed a whole new country called the Confederate States of America. And once they did that, they elected this young fellow from Mississippi, Jefferson Davis, to be their president. And they organized here in Montgomery. Now, right here where you see our this Renaissance hotel lot, that was a whole big office building on that block. And on where the Confederate government was headquarters in that office building there. So they, well, as we talk about the Confederacy, like I said, they formed here in Montgomery. And even here in Montgomery, the president of the Confederate government decided that any government property that was located in a Confederate state should be turned over to the Confederate government. So therefore, Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederate States of America, the first and only president of the Confederate States, demanded that any government property that was located in a Confederate state should be turned over to the Confederate government. Well, there's a place in South Carolina called Fort Sumter, and that was a government facility installation in the United States. Well, Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederate States, is demanding that Fort Sumter be turned over to the Confederate government because Fort Sumter is located in South Carolina, and South Carolina is a Confederate state. And they demanded that that be turned over, and that, in essence, we'll talk about a little later, that started the Civil War. Now, when we talk about Montgomery, Alabama, we also have to talk about the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott. This is the part where Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a Montgomery City bus. Now, the policy of blacks sitting in the rear of the bus and whites sitting to the front was the Jim Crow era laws that came out of the Jim Crow custom, which turned into laws. As a matter of fact, Alabama and the city of Montgomery adopted ordinance to that effect, that blacks was to sit in the rear. Now, one thing, guys, that you must understand, Rosa Parks was not violating the segregation laws of that day. Rosa Parks was sitting in the first row of seat that was for blacks. But what happened was that the bus got crowded. And when the bus got crowded, there was white people standing. The bus driver was not going to tolerate white people standing. It was a period in time that they would make an 80-year-old black woman get up to let an 8-year-old white boy sit down. So that's what the Montgomery bus boycott was all about. And then again, that's something we'll talk about a little bit later when we get up to the square. As we go along here, I'd like to point out to you right here is a statue of Hank Williams Sr., country singer. Hank Williams was born about 42 miles south of Montgomery, a little place called Georgiana. But he grew up here in Montgomery. And he credited a black man for teaching him how to play the guitar. On my tours, when I'm on my tours, I usually take my guests to Hank Williams' grave site here in Montgomery. Right down the street behind us here is the Hank Williams Museum. So your country singers, lovers, Montgomery still got something for you. Okay? Now, as we continue on walking, I'd like to point out the architect of some of the old buildings here in Montgomery. And what I like to try to say to my guests is that these buildings were, before the wrecking ball came along and tore them down, someone decided to save them. So you'll see in a lot of spots where new buildings that doesn't have the chasm, I'm not sure what the word is, that these older buildings have. They have such architectural design where the others are just straight up and down type buildings. So as you travel around Montgomery, you'll see a lot of the old architect from days past and gone. Mm-hmm. Right? Beautiful. As we continue out, when we talk about history in Montgomery, then we talk about the Confederacy, we talk about the bus boycott. Now we got to talk about the 1961 Freedom Riders. Now this is another Jim Crow era law, which required a major mode of transportation at this time. And let me back up a little bit. When we talk about transportation, the early mode of transportation was by river. So Montgomery, along with quite a few of your other cities, was founded upon a river. Montgomery is no exception. But then we come to a period of time where the bus was our major mode of transportation. And of course, we're talking about your Trailaway and your Greyhound buses. Now, the 1961 Freedom Riders was about, there was a young fellow from Selma, Alabama. His name was Bruce Boykin. Now, Bruce just passed away about 4 months ago here in Montgomery. He was a retired lawyer. Bruce was from Selma, Alabama, and Bruce was going to law school at Howard University in D.C. And Bruce was on his way home for Christmas back to Selma, and he was on a Greyhound bus. The bus stopped in Richmond, Virginia. And when the bus stopped in Richmond, Virginia, Bruce goes in to get something to eat. And when he goes in to get something to eat, the side that was designated for blacks was so filthy and nasty till Bruce went over on the white side to get something to eat. And when Bruce goes over there to get something to eat on the white side, of course he was arrested. Now at this particular time, Thurgood Marshall is a ACP legal defense fund. So Thurgood Marshall served as Bruce's lawyer. And they sued, and the court ruled that segregation and interstate transportation facilities, which is your bus station, and the facilities was unconstitutional. So the court has ruled on this. And after the court ruled on this, There's an organization called CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. And they decided that they was going to organize a ride starting in Washington, D.C., ending in New Orleans, Louisiana on Mother's Day. And the purpose was, the court has made this ruling, so what we're going to do is we're going to get on the bus in Washington, D.C., headed to New Orleans, and we're going to stop in most of these cities, and we're going to get out. Now on this ride, let me point out, was I think 7 blacks and 6 whites. That was a total of 13, if I stand corrected, but of both races on this bus. And what they did, when they got into a city, they would stop and they'd go into the bus station. The whites would go on the black side and the blacks would go on the white side. And their purpose for doing this was this bus station obeying that court order. And needless to say, they ran into all kind of violence. Birmingham, Alabama, Anderson, Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, and on down to Jackson, Mississippi. They got to Jackson, Mississippi. They got put in prison over there for 2 months, I believe, in Parchman Prison. Parchman is still a notorious prison in Mississippi. It has a 15,000-acre prison farm there. But these young people, these are college students, remind you, at this point, that got to Mississippi. So these college students spent like 2 months in Parchman Prison in Mississippi. But again, what I like to refer to as another domino of the Jim Crow era, because of the Freedom Ride failed, it forced the Kennedy administration, the Interstate Commerce Commission, to enforce that court order. So that was another domino. Now, while we're in this little part, let me point out something else to you guests, to my guests. As you can see over here is this huge water tower. That water tower was up on the top of these buildings at one time. And they lowered that water tower down there, and it's the entry into what we call is Montgomery's answer to Bourbon Street. That's where our little restaurants and bars and stuff are located there. So when you come to Montgomery, you'll get to go in the alley and have your favorite drink. or your favorite food as well. Okay?
Watch out for the water tower.
Watch out just look for the water tower, and you go in there and you get watered up. Is there any questions throughout the process? Feel free to ask. I'll be more than happy to try to answer your question. And if I don't know the answer, I always got Chris with me, and he knows everything. So we're good to go on that.
We've got hello from Daniel Muchia. I know who that is. Michelle Sandeman, that's my mom watching.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Mom. Getting some comments from Paolo Merced. Thank you guys for just keeping commenting away. It helps a ton. And Ann Ritchie says greetings from Palo Alto, California.
Oh, okay. Now, Chris, if I could show you guests this building across the street here. This building over here, during the Civil War, was a prison camp. When the Confederate captured Union soldiers, they was in prison here in this building. Now, in later years, when I was in high school, probably wasn't that many years ago, okay, it was a grocery warehouse. I remember out of there. Now, when I was in college, that building was a 4-star, at least a 4-star Sheraton hotel. Very nice hotel. But today, that is home of the Montgomery Biscuits. And the Montgomery Biscuits is not where you go to eat biscuits, it's where you go to watch a baseball game. The Montgomery Biscuit is the name of the baseball team here. They are the farm club of the Tampa Bay Rays. And they are named the Biscuits because you're in the heart of the Deep South. And what do we love in the Deep South? Biscuits and gravy. So that's why our baseball team is named the Biscuit. Now, as we continue on, if I can share this building, again, I want you to pay attention to the architects of the buildings. These are the old buildings that's been saved. Now, this building here on this corner used to be a furniture warehouse. And as you can look and see, is that it is a beautiful building, but now it's a Spring Hill Suite Hotel. And the only thing they had to do to the exterior of these buildings was clean the bricks. And it is simply beautiful. If you get to Montgomery, you gotta got to enjoy the architect of the old buildings. And down this way over here is the Dreamland Barbecue. If you come to Montgomery, Dreamland is one of those barbecue places. When you come to Montgomery, when you come to the South, now you know we all gonna argue about who does the best barbecue. We claim we do it in Montgomery, Kansas City claims they do it, Memphis claim they got the best barbecue, but we really know the truth. I'm in Montgomery, so Montgomery's the best, because that's why I live here, for the barbecue. Not to mention, don't forget the fried chicken though. So if you come to the South, you gotta have got to do your barbecue and you gotta do your fried chicken. But so we talked about the Confederacy, we talked about the Montgomery bus boycott, we talked about the Freedom Riders, and these out of the Confederate came these various Jim Crow laws. And as we go along with the Montgomery bus boycott, that was one of those Jim Crow era laws that fell. When we talk about the 1961 Freedom Riders, again, another domino falls. Now let's talk about the 1965 Selma to Montgomery Voters' Rights March, which ended here on the steps of the state capitol here in Montgomery. Now, I was 12 years old at the time, and my mother left and went to work that day, and she told my sisters and me to go to school. Well, of course, when she left to go to school, we got on the back of Mr. Cosby's pickup truck, and we went and joined the march. My sister and I marched the fourth day of the march, which is approximately 15 miles. But as we talk about the 1965 Selma to Montgomery Voters' Rights March, we got to reflect back. And what I want to reflect you back to is, let's go back to the Confederacy. After the Confederacy fell, there was condition for them to come back into the United States. And one of those things was they had to accept federal troops being stationed in the South, and they had to adopt the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Now, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. And it's so good that let me stop on this 13th Amendment. We'll come back and go through the rest. But on this 13th Amendment, it abolished slavery except for as punishment for a crime. Now, that law is still on the books today. And I said it was good because we're coming right by a spot right now, the Legacy Museum here in Montgomery. The Legacy Museum is operated by Equal Justice Initiative. And I think at this point in time, Equal Justice Initiative have started a process of trying to abolish that part of the 13th Amendment. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you got to understand that we still have legal slavery in America by way of the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment says slavery is hereby abolished except for as punishment for a crime. So when you come to Montgomery, Alabama, you got to tour the Legacy Museum. You got to let me take you on a tour of the Legacy Museum. The Legacy Museum was established in April of 2018, and what this museum focuses upon is the evolution from slavery to mass incarceration. And what it says is that you start out with the slavery, enslavement, kidnapping, and then it progresses on to terrorism, then to segregation, and then to mass incarceration. So what you got to realize is that slavery didn't go away, it evolves. It evolved from slavery to mass incarceration, and it's provided for in the Constitution in the 13th Amendment that that's the only way we can have slavery in America is as punishment for a crime. So mass incarceration is another word for slavery, okay? But this is the Legacy Museum. Now in this building, we talked about the domestic slave trade earlier. In this building where the Legacy Museum is stationed at was actually a slave warehouse. They brought the enslaved people up the river and on the railroad track, and they brought them up and locked them up in this building until it was time to take them up to the square that we're gonna go later for sale, okay? But again, you got to really focus upon that 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery except for as punishment for a crime. All right? Now, while we're at it, let me the domestic, why enslaved people was in such a demand here because of the cotton. Let me point this building out to you right across the street here. Now this was the old John Morgan house. John Morgan was a warehouser. He used to warehouse slaves and cotton. So now if you look at his house, he had a pretty lucrative business. Well, that old house is now in the process of being developed into a autograph collection hotel. But again, pointing out now, while we mentioned the enslaved, and I talked about it earlier, I keep going back to it, I think I want you to know, people, that in downtown Montgomery, there were 4 warehouses where they brought the enslaved people, locked them up in the warehouse until it was time to take them for sale up on the square. And in 1860, Montgomery issued 186 licenses to people as slave traders. 186, let that sink in. 186 licenses was issued for slave traders in Montgomery. As I said, Montgomery was your major market for enslaved people. Right? Before we get back to the amendments, I'd just like to point out a few things that are going on in downtown Montgomery. Prior to the pandemic hitting, Montgomery hotels stayed 95% occupant. I'm getting calls, and I'm hoping everyone that's tuned into this broadcast today, or whenever you tune into it, that you too will call me and set up a tour of Montgomery, Alabama. I want you all to come. But I just want to point out over here, a place here to start doing food trucks. I had some guests earlier this week, and they wanted to know whether they love food trucks. That was none here at that time. We got one here right now. But also, this is things Montgomery is trying to develop to bring our city out and redevelop our downtown area. Right beyond the food trucks, because all the hotels here in the downtown area, a lot of people travel with their pets. There's a dog park where you can bring your pet and let them just roam themselves instead of being cooped up in a hotel room.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. But let me just talk about the development of downtown Montgomery. Many years ago, they started this thing that they call a mall. And when they started this thing called a mall, then all the so downtown was deserted, all empty buildings. So a few years ago, 20-some plus years ago, the city of Montgomery said to these owners who lived in Boston, New York, or God knows where, of these buildings in downtown Montgomery, said, you're going to have to do something with them. So what eventually happened, the city of Montgomery bought all of those buildings and they made them available to developers. They sold to the developers at a very reasonable price, with the understanding that you got to tell us what you're going to do with it and when. And so now Montgomery is really started coming back to life. We have a lot of developments going on. A lot of our millennials, Montgomery's got a very high demand for apartments and in downtown Montgomery. So a lot of these old buildings, the ground level is being developed into retails, but they're going up with apartments. And as I said, your millennials wants to live downtown. Now, let me get back. I was talking about the what these rebellion states had to do to get back into the Union. As I said, they had to accept troops was being stationed throughout the South to ensure that those former slaves who are now free people, rights would not be taken away from them, okay? So, and then we got to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, except for as punishment for a crime. Then the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship. But here comes that 15th Amendment that gave voting rights to black men's. Now, particular time, only white men could vote. And this amendment to the Constitution gave black men the right to vote. But you got to remember, women still do not have the right to vote. And I should know exactly, but women didn't get the right to vote till either 19th or 21st Amendment. You check me on that one. One of those amendments gave women the right to vote. But now, let me submit just one thing to you listeners out there. Black women didn't get the right to vote until 1965. Even though on books they had the right to vote, but they couldn't vote. Very few women black women could vote. I'd like to deal with a lot of my guests, especially the ones from the northern part of the country. They quite often kind of think lesser of us Southerners. But a point I'd like to give all of you all to think about or to consider is that until we got the voting rights, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, most of the northern blacks could not vote. And when the 1965 Voting Rights Act got passed, I believe the Carl Stoke of Cleveland, I believe was his name, I stand corrected again, I'm sorry, got to be elected the first black mayor of a major U.S. city, but because of the Voting Rights Act. But, okay, so the 15th Amendment gave, and that last amendment, that 15th Amendment, the last state to ratify that, was done in 1870. So roughly we'll say 1870, you got the right to vote, okay? So that's why I want to connect that with the 1965 Montgomery Bus Park. 1965 Selma Montgomery Voting Rights March. Because listen people, what they was fighting for in 1965, 95 years earlier, it was granted to them in the 15th Amendment. 95 years earlier. I want you to really understand that. Had the right to vote, but through a system of Jim Crow laws, through terrorism, hanging, lynching, murders, drowning, killing, poll tax, literacy tax, all of those things, Jim Crow era things, took away that right that they had acquired to vote in 1870. 95 years, 1965, we're back on the streets demanding the right to vote. So now how did we get to the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March? There was an organization formed up at Shaw University in North Carolina, and this organization was called SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And the purpose of SNCC was, there was a different organization from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, but by the same token, they was a wing of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, although independent of them. Now what SNCC did, they got college students. They got 2 college students and sent them into every county in the South to register black people to vote. And my county, we're in Montgomery. My county is midways between Montgomery and Selma, which is Dallas County. My county is Lowndes County. And in Lowndes County, they sent Bob Mance from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, and Stokely Carmichael from Howard University in D.C. They was assigned to Lowndes County, Alabama to register black people to vote. But over in Perry County, over in West Alabama, Perry County is the home of Coretta Scott King, where she was born and raised. In Perry County, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference sent a field worker over there, and his name was James Orange. Now, James Orange was over there trying to register black people to vote. So one day, James Orange organized the young people, and he had about 7 in the county seat of Marion marching. So they arrested James Orange and put him in jail and charged him with contributing to the delinquency of children. Well, they came up, the sheriff and the others in the jailhouse came up with a unique idea. They was going to kill James Orange that night, and they was going to make it look like he committed suicide. But the only thing that happened, they were making all these plans, and the black janitor was there mopping the floor. So he hears this plan, the black janitor, and so he goes back to the black community and let them know what is happening. So the black community said, we got to do something. So what they decided to do, they said, well tonight we'll get together at Zion United Methodist Church, in downtown Marion. Zion United Methodist Church was located 1 block from the Perry County jailhouse. And we'll march down to the jailhouse, and we'll stand in front of the jailhouse and sing freedom songs to James Orange up there in the jailhouse. We'll stand outside, but as long as we're there, our presence will save his life. They ain't gonna try to murder him while we're there. So this is their plan. So they get out and they leave the church and they started heading for the courthouse, the jailhouse, I'm sorry. And as soon as they get out of there and started headed for the jailhouse, the state police started shooting out the street lights and people run for cover. And when people run for cover, there was a little cafe right behind Zion United Methodist Church named Mac Cafe. Some of them ran up into Mac's Cafe for cover. Listen, I tell all of my guests, when you hear gunshot, a good run is kind of better than a bad stand. So you might want to take off, okay? Don't stand around and see what's going on. So some of them went up in Mac's Cafe. Well, this state police came up there with his billy club hitting people. This guy tried to block the state police from hitting his 82-year-old grandfather and his mother. The state police pulled out his gun and shot him. He died 8 days later at a hospital in Selma, Alabama. His name was Jimmy Lee Jackson. And because of the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson, people got so upset, they had even suggested one time to take his body and throw it on the steps of the state capitol and let the governor, George Wallace, know by not giving us. Eventually, they organized a march to march from Selma to Montgomery. And they, that particular Sunday, they left March 7, 1965, they left Brown's Chapel AME Church, and they headed to march to Montgomery. But as you go out of Selma, there's a bridge over the Alabama River there called the Pettus Bridge. And when they got to the apex of that bridge and looked down, all they saw was a sea of blue. State police and state troopers, city police, deputy sheriff, on horsebacks, all kind of stuff. And they beated those people mercifully. And that was shown throughout the world, and that became known as Bloody Sunday. As a matter of fact, we just observed that anniversary last weekend. But the Bloody Sunday, the march to Selma to Montgomery was sparked by the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson. They eventually did march to Montgomery, led by Dr. Martin Luther King. And when they rallied on the steps of the state capitol here in Montgomery, there was more than 25,000 people there. Another one of those dominoes fell because all of those Jim Crow era laws that was put into place, a poll tax, literacy test, through the Civil Rights Act of 1965, signed by Lyndon Baines Johnson, President Johnson, it removes all of those obstacles. And that's when blacks got really back up. And that's when I said black women didn't really, literally get the right to vote until 1965. But
we had some post. The 19th Amendment ratified in 1920.
Okay.
Was the general right
for the women's, right? Okay. 19th Amendment,
1920.
1920, when women's got the right to vote. Still through obstacles.
Thank you, Michaela and Rebecca, for that.
Okay. Thanks. So really, they even though the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, and some of them did get registered, some black, but not in large numbers, not until 1965. Now, if I could break off for a minute here to talk about where we are here in downtown Montgomery. I want to focus up this street here. If you can focus up this street here, this is Monroe Street in downtown Montgomery. Now, back in the day, Monroe Street was the black business district. Here on Monroe Street as a child, a young person, I remember the old Pekin's Theater. Pekin's Theater and Pekin's Cafe, but the Pekin's Theater was the black theater. And I tell all my guests, and I tell you all as well, it had more roaches in it than people. Also on Monroe Street in 1905, a black guy, Harris, started a drugstore. It was called Dean's Drugstore here on Monroe Street. Now, another thing about Monroe Street, most of the buildings here go all the way through over to Dexter Avenue. And in that situation where they had two entries, the blacks had to enter those buildings from Monroe Street. They was not allowed to enter from Dexter unless that was the only entry into the building. But this is, now another thing about Monroe Street, approximately where I'm standing right now, Monroe Street was dead end right here. This was Court Street going both ways. And Monroe Street dead end. And I tell you that because I remember as a young man having, there was two cafes here at this dead end, the Eli Cafe and the Canyon. And I remember going to those cafes and having the best meal for $1.75. You know, I was eating high on the hog, and that was quite expensive at that time to pay 75 cents, $1.75 for a full course meal, meat and two or meat and three as we call it down south. You got a meal and two vegetables, a meat and two vegetables, or meat and three vegetables.
Like lunch today.
Like lunch today. I got Chris down here and got him some barbecue ribs and fried chicken. Now he don't want to go back. And when you all get here as well, I'm going to make sure you go to some of those places. But again, I want to point out some buildings to you here on Monroe Street. Now, the first building here is, you see Golden Shears. That Golden Shears building, it had an entry here on Monroe Street. That's what you're looking at now. Now, way over on the other side of that building was an entry on Dexter Avenue. And then on the side of this building on Court Street was an entry. So it was a large department store. Now, back in younger man, I'm young still, but I was younger then. Back in those days when we gentlemen bought a pair of slacks, they had to be hemmed. And your larger department store would have a seamstress or a tailor on duty. Whereas your smaller department store, you bought a pair of slacks from them, they sent you to the tailor shop to have them hemmed. Of course, they paid for it. But this building here was the old Montgomery Fair department store. And like I said, it was a large department store because it had 3 separate entries. And the important things about the Montgomery Fair department store, that's where Rosa Parks worked at. Remember, she was a seamstress. So she worked in the Montgomery Fair department store. As I said, when men's brought some slacks, they had to be hemmed. So that's the exact building that Rosa Parks worked at. And when she got out for work that day, from that building, she went to the corner of Court Street and Dexter Avenue and boarded her bus. Now, if we can focus back here again at the old Crest building, we're going to go in that Crest building in a minute. But the Crest building, back in the 40s and 50s, I suppose, your 5 and dime stores in every city was your Crest or your Woodward. Some of your bigger cities had both. Well, the S.H. Crest was our 5 and dimes here in Montgomery. And it was, it had 2 entries, and we'll show them to you. If I could focus your attention away again on the red brick building across the street here. That building is Montgomery City Hall. You're looking at the side of it right there. But in the Montgomery City Hall in 1953, Hank Williams Sr., when the country and western singer that we showed you a statue of earlier, Hank Williams Sr. Funeral was held there in Montgomery City Hall in the auditorium, and I was told that there was over 3,000 people at that funeral. Also in that particular building, at that time, 1955, the police department was headquarters in City Hall. Now they got their own standalone building elsewhere here in the city. But in 1955, it was located there. And that's where Rosa Parks, when she was arrested on December 1, 1955, they took her into that building, fingerprinted her, and did her mugshot in that building, okay? That's Montgomery City Hall, still is today. A year or so ago, Montgomery celebrated its 200th birthday, the same year that the state of Alabama celebrated its 200th birthday. The city of Montgomery is 2 weeks older than the state of Alabama. And I think, let's see, 2014, but at any rate, just in the last municipal election, after Montgomery was 200 years old, we elected our first African-American mayor of the city of Montgomery. So we now, Mayor Steve Reed is the mayor of the city of Montgomery, the first in the 200-year history of the city, our first African-American mayor. Again, if you can reflect back to looking down Monroe Street, also that was where one of the slave warehouses was located, a slave pen, you may want to call it, was located down this street as well, here on Monroe Street.
Jake, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I haven't been interrupting you
No.
because, but you've been having a lot of people reaching out and saying hello, calling you a legend. Thank you, everyone. Please keep your comments coming. That does really help us show more people Jake's story. It means a ton. But just because I came through with you earlier on and you talked about it with me, just so everyone understands it, even though this building that we're about to go into crosses from Monroe Street over to
Dexter Avenue.
This was the white people would not enter the buildings from this side. This was the side were forced to enter the buildings from and have a separate entrance than white people who would enter from
the front,
fancier Dexter Avenue on the other side.
Right.
Okay, just so everyone understands that, what that, what that means.
Right.
Yeah.
And as we go into this building, at that time, back on the floor here, there was not tile on the floor because this is where the black entered at, and they didn't put tile on the floor at that time. It was just bare concrete because this is where the black entered at, so they didn't have to have tile on the floor. They just entered with the bare concrete. Now, as a child, I used to shop in this store. I used to shop in this store. As you can get remember, this is a 5 and dime, but it was real fancy. We'll show you more of it as we go. But it was real fancy. But as a child, I used to shop at this store, and this, right, we just came in the back door off of Monroe Street. But just before you went out the back door, there was water fountains right here. And the water fountain right here was, and as a child, I drank out of that water fountain that said colored. So when they was remodeling this building a few years ago, they uncovered the old facade that where the water fountain was above the water fountain. You see the holes there. That's where the plumbing came through. And if you look closely up at the white and the color sign, you'll see a little hole on each side. They had covered the white and colored up after integration. But as a child, I drank from that water fountain. But the access and experience was not equal. The 1929 architectural store design ensured racial groups stayed divided by building separate restroom, separate dressing room, separate restaurant, separate water fountain for its white and colored store customers. But this is a remnant of that, and when they was remodeling this building, they uncovered that, and so it's now here for all to see.
The layers of history.
Layers of history. As we continue through, and I hope we don't lose signal, and here we're going through a building. Just
a warning on it. I'm gonna run up ahead for the folks, guys, because we tested this before, and the signal stayed, but the walls are a little strong in here, a little thick in here. So if we do lose you, we'll be right back again. But it should work fine. I'm just gonna move a little bit faster than you, Jake, with my long legs.
Yeah. If you can focus up at the ceiling again, if you can, again, we talk about the beauty of the building. This is a 5 and dime store, but look how gorgeous it looked. Now on the ground level, when they remodeled this, they did little specialty shops here. Here was a barber shop that became a victim of the COVID-19 virus. And right here is a podcast studio where you could go in and record your stories. So there's all kind of little conversation rooms and et cetera here on the ground level. But as we get outside here, you're going to see that the developers went up about 3 or 4 stories building apartments here on this building here.
Great, that worked really well, Jake.
Okay.
Good plan.
Now, as we move into this space, first of all, you got to realize you are in the middle of the Montgomery Fair department store. This is where Rosa Parks worked at. Now, I understand that there was a basement under this building. I think that's where she did her sewing at down. This is a city park now, like I said, you're in the middle of the Montgomery Fair department store, and this is a city park. And when they was doing the dedication of this park, the mayor had it be known to the young people there'd be no skating boards here. But as you look around here, you can tell this is a newer building was put in here, and this is an upscale coffee shop. The Union Prevail coffee shop. Got all your latte and all of your other fine coffee. Now, if we focus back here on this old Crest building, if you look up there, they went up 3, 4 floors with apartments, and they run the entire length of that old Crest building. And your millennials, they love to stay downtown. They live in these apartments. They hang out here at this upscale coffee shop, and they drink their latte and they jet fuel and be on their computers, and so they just all around here. Right out through this way, over this way was the Court Street entry to this department store. Now, it burned out many years ago, okay? It burned out many years ago. And if we look straight ahead back over here, we're going to go out this way, and that's the Dexter Avenue entry. Now, they towed this out because of the apartments up here had to have emergency fire escapes because they went above all these buildings and did apartments, these old buildings, and did apartments, and they had to have fire escapes, so they towed this part out here. As you can see, they're all in the coffee shop there on their computers and having a shot of jet fuel and other stuff. I had a guest from California, and she asked me, had I ever had any latte? And I said, no, ma'am, I haven't. I stick with my Maxwell House instant coffee. And she insisted that I had a cup of latte. It tore my stomach up, people. I never do latte again. Oh, but as I said, this...
Is this original wall over here?
Yes, that's the original wall there, you know. But you see, buildings was bumped up against each other here. So they didn't clean the bricks off or anything because that was not seen. That was another wall flushed against that one. So when they tore all this out, you saw all this. Like I say, normally the bricks would have been cleaned up, but because they was not going to be seen, they was not cleaned up. Okay? Over here, if we can focus on it, Chris, is some pictures here of the way the old Montgomery Fair department store looked. Now, back there on Monroe Street where we were, can you see that? Can the camera focus in? That's the way the Montgomery Fair department store entry looked back there on Monroe Street where we were. Now, the picture down below here, that's the way it looked on Court Street. That's the part I told you that burned out. And if you look here, this is the way it looked at the entry here on Dexter Avenue. Now, they towed this out, but they preserved the facade. And when we back out of here, you're going to be able to see they preserved the facade the way it looked at. But the interior, they gutted it out, and it's a city park.
Can you guys see that when I'm filming on this? I can't really tell with the light whether or not. On the phone, it's hard to tell whether you can see what's in the light and the shadow. People can just let me know if you can make out that stuff. It'll let me know for next time I'm doing a tour with Jake what I can and I can't show.
Okay, as we come on out this way, we are on Dexter Avenue. This is downtown street here in Montgomery. I'm on Mac, sir. I'm on.
He's on camera right now.
We're on the downtown. We're on the downtown Dexter Avenue. This is the main street here in downtown Montgomery. If we can go over this way, as Chris progresses here, if you can see, we're looking up at the state capitol. This is Dexter Avenue. This is the main street in downtown Montgomery. That is our state capitol for the state of Alabama. It was in that state capitol building where the 7 southern states met and formed the Confederate States of America. It was up at the top of the steps of the state capitol that Jefferson Davis was sworn in as president of the Confederate States of America. It was on the steps of that state capitol that George Wallace, governor of Alabama in 1963, declared segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. And down at the very base of that steps on the street, Dr. Martin Luther King in 1965 delivered his how long, not long speech from right there at the state capitol. So you got there on the steps or at our state capitol. Chris, could you focus at that eagle up there? Can you see him?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, that eagle up there is up to, it's not a real live eagle, it's a concrete eagle, you all. That's why he's not flying.
Very still.
He's very still. But this is that building is where Jefferson Davis had his inauguration ball in that building. I understand his pigeons got it all filled up now, so maybe one day somebody will do something with it. Now, if I could get you, Chris, to around here at this old Crest building. The Crest building, as I said, was a 5 and dime store. But look at the beautiful architect of that building. It was a gorgeous building. And all of the Crest buildings throughout the South, wherever they was located, was very great, beautiful architect. Even though there was a 5 and dime store.
Jake, this is the same building that we just entered in on the other side, right?
Right, exactly. Now,
this entrance looks a lot different.
This is where the whites entered at. The white could enter Crest from Dexter Avenue. Blacks had to enter Crest from Monroe Street, where we just came from. But this is the old Crest. If Chris can panorama it around and you can see some of the buildings here, they're all great architects' buildings. Hey, doing good, man. How are you?
Good.
Doing good. Good seeing you. Gentleman from the Chamber of Commerce, our small town business association. But all of these buildings, some of the old structures that preserved, they have some beautiful architect. Now, again, if we could focus on Dexter Avenue here, this is the main downtown street. And all of my guests that I have, especially coming from bigger cities, this is downtown. Where are all the people? Well, first of all, you got to remember. And another thing you have to kind of remember about Montgomery and about the South, Montgomery in particular, most people have their own cars. So very few people are utilizing public transportation, which would facilitate a lot of people on the streets here. And as I said, the retails are not downtown, so these are all working places. And all of these old buildings, as they restored them, they are restoring them to ground level, some kind of shops. Watch the arm.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch to the other side just so I can get you back. Not to put the sun in your face.
No problem. As they developed the downtown, the ground floor into retails, they go up with apartments. So your millennials, again, they are great people, millennials are, because I'm one of them, of course. They are staying downtown, the coffee shop there, they work downtown. So that's why you don't see very much activity of people going on the streets here. It's very, very limited.
So above that crest, that's apartment buildings up there.
So this building, from Dexter Avenue all the way back to Monroe Street, they went up 4 stories, 4 floors, and got all apartments here. A lot of people live there. As I was telling you about our farm club, our baseball farm club, a lot of those baseball players live here in that Crest apartment buildings. Again, another thing I was telling you about Montgomery, as we developed downtown here, we're trying to bring different kind of eateries the city are. On the end, you got way up the street there, and I don't think it's out of our range, is the old Chris's hot dog stand. And Chris's hot dog stand has been in that same location 103 years. The 3rd generation of that Greek family is running Chris's hot dog. Most people come to Montgomery for a hot dog. That's where the green
or the green and white one down?
Both of them.
I'll try to zoom in for the people.
Okay, that's Chris's hot dog. A staple here in Montgomery for 103 years in the same location, 3rd generation of that Greek family. And great-grandson, now the third generation, he tells all of my guests about, his grandfather said that, here in Montgomery, they didn't like Greeks, they didn't like Catholics, they didn't like no other nationality, blacks or anything else, and that includes Greeks. Now, but they did a thing where they first started to come outside and wait on the customers on the streets, bring their orders out to them. So they started the first drive-in, but the city had to ask them to stop because it caused so much of a traffic jam here. Now he also tells a thing about his grandfather used to save the newspaper every Sunday for Dr. Martin Luther King, because the church that Dr. King pastor is about 3 blocks up this street here on Dexter Avenue. So his grandfather would always save Dr. King his newspaper every Sunday. Another thing that he said about his grandfather was that his grandfather was all about, he didn't care about, he was Greek. The city fathers didn't like Greeks or Catholic or anybody else that was non-white. But this Greek family, they had to, if they wanted to stay in business, they had to obey the segregation laws. And the segregation laws said that they could serve blacks. They could come in there and buy their hot dogs, but they was not allowed to eat them there, okay? But again, I want to try to emphasize to you that, and they're still trying to bring more eateries into downtown, but round from Chris's Hot Dog, right back around this corner here was Mama's Sack Lunch. Lord, now she does an excellent job of all kinds of sandwiches and broccoli salad. I always remember that one.
No Dave's Cafe.
But Mama's Sack Lunch is around there. You can get your sack lunch to go. On the end, bread pub. Right next to it is a Cusco Mexican restaurant. And right around this corner here is a Frosty gourmet popsicle shop. Now, at this Frosty, I understand you have to pay like about $5 for a popsicle, but it's made of real fruit. What I'm trying to emphasize to you is the variety of stuff that we have here in Montgomery. Now, Mama Goldsberg is a deli. I think it's a national chain, but they do some very good deli sandwiches. And right next to it is Rock and Roll Sushi Bar. Just opened a couple of months ago, and I'm not all that sure about what they serve because I haven't been there yet. But right next to it here,
rock and roll and sushi.
So, yeah. And right next to it is Island Delight. Island Delight is a Jamaican family operates Island Delight, and they you want your jerk chicken, you go to Island Delight, and they'll really set you up.
Jake, it's nice that you're not just a historian and a scholar and a storyteller, but you're also a real ambassador for your city here.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, hey, Joe. All right, historian. He just written a book. Hey, Joe. Joe's book is From Marion to Montgomery, the story of Alabama State University.
Fantastic. Can we see it on Amazon? Is it on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay.
They won't be able to hear you on the mic unless you come over, but what we can do is I can put a link to it in the notes section on the video.
Now, Joe's a historian here, and like I said, he's done a lot of research. Alabama State. Doing good, doing good. Alabama State. Okay.
How do I get this to focus on that?
Alabama State University is my alma mater here in Montgomery, and it's about 150 years old, but it started...
I'll post that later on.
Okay.
I'm trying to focus it with my nose, but it's not working.
Okay. Alabama State University also was started in Marion, where Coretta Scott King was born and raised at. Joe just did extensive research and did a book on From Marion to Montgomery, the story of Alabama State University. But now, getting back, again, the beautiful architects of our old buildings downtown here. Now, I don't know if I finished up with the Montgomery bus boycott. I mean, Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March, and I don't want to leave y'all cliffhanging. They shot and killed Jimmy Lee Jackson over in Marion. The people got so angry they threatened to bring his body and put it on the steps of the state capitol. Right. But calmer heads prevailed, and they gave him a decent burial. But on March 7, 1965, about 600 to 800 people left Brown's Chapel AME Church in Selma, Alabama, headed to Montgomery. When they got to the apex of the Pettus Bridge, the bridge that crossed in downtown Selma, it's crossed the Alabama River, goes right through downtown Selma as it does downtown Montgomery. And when they got to the apex of that bridge, and John Lewis and Jose Williams was leading that march. And when they got and met the state police over there, state police told them this march is illegal and it cannot continue, and you must return to your home. Do you understand? Now, according to them, they was going to kneel and pray. But when the state commander, police commander, said, you got 3 minutes, and said, do you understand? And in the same breath, he said, troopers, advance. And that's where they attacked them, and that particular day became known as Bloody Sunday. And as a result of that, they eventually, the judge here, Montgomery Judge Frank M. Johnson, gave a permit to march, and they marched from Selma to Montgomery. It's a total of 54 miles, 5 days, 4 campsites. There was 3 murders associated with this march and 3 repercussions. Now, when y'all come to Montgomery, you hire me to be your tour guide, we're going to do a retrace. I call it the Selma experience. We're going to retrace, we're going to backtrack from the steps of the state capitol all the way to the steps of the Brown's Chapel AME Church in Selma, and I get to show you all of everything that happened in between, because like I said, as a 12-year-old, I was in that march one day. But as a result of that march, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that removed all the barriers to voting rights for everybody. But I'm repeating myself, but now you remember. But that was another domino fell. So that's when you look at the 1955 Montgomery Bus Boycott, 1961 Freedom Riders, the 1965 Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March. All of those is what I like to call dominoes falling of Jim Crow era laws. Now, I want to focus back to the Confederacy again.
Quick question.
Yes,
Teague,
yeah.
Teague just joined us.
Okay.
Teague's often supporting us. It's always great to see Teague back again. Quick question. How far is Selma from here? The history seems very intertwined with Montgomery's history.
Right. Well, the march itself from the steps of Brown's Chapel AME Church to the steps of the state capitol is 54 miles. So in essence, Montgomery city limits is like 54 miles. I mean, 50 miles. City limits is like about 50 miles, but from the steps of Brown's Chapel AME Church to the steps of the state capitol is 54 miles.
And Corey Creel, Mr. Williams, do you have a website for us to book your tours and get more information of upcoming events?
Okay.
And the answer is it's posted in the link, in the description for this tour, and it will be as well. But also the website is?
MyMontgomeryTours at MontgomeryTours.com.
Yeah, MyMontgomeryTours.com.
Okay, it's a website. Mm-hmm.
And before you were telling me that actually we're quite lucky that I feel very fortunate regardless, but that usually you wouldn't do a 100% just walking tour.
Exactly.
You do a walking driving tour.
Yes, that's what I like to do. Now, first of all, you got to understand Montgomery in the dead heat of summer is very, very hot here. So to try to walk all of this in June, July, August, September, if you're from somewhere else, you might not be able to take this heat. So I describe on my website a driving walking tour. And what we do, we drive to a certain spot, we get out and we walk around and talk about it. Then we get back into my tour van and we go to another spot. If we just did, because there are so many things that is like too far away for us to walk to, that I include upon my tours. You know, now the church that Dr. King pastors is about 4 blocks back up this street here. And normally I would drive my van up there and we would talk about the church and the state capitol and stuff. We would go over to the parsonage where Dr. King lived. And we'd get out and go on the porch of that, or even toured during touring season. And so there's a lot of things. Hank Williams grave site, Alabama State University, Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald Museum, the Rosa Parks apartment where she lived at, St. Jude's where we camped out at the final night before marching to the state capitol. These things are too far away to walk. So I describe on my site a walking, driving, or driving, walking tour. Okay? So, but just look me up on my website, book me, and we're looking for you this summer. We're going to back up. Everybody's getting their shot in the arms, as I have, both of mine. So hopefully we'll see you this summer.
Take a look. We've just posted some links to your website just there as well.
Okay. All right.
And Corey says, I'm actually in Montgomery area and hoping to speak more with you as they are writing a freelance article on this tour.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Williams, thank you so much for this. So
okay.
Corey's going to be in touch with you, it sounds like.
Great.
Thank you, Corey, for your interest.
Hey.
Having spent some time with Jake right now, I can tell you that, geez, he's a wealth of information. So you picked the right guy to talk to.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it, Corey.
What's this
now,
building? Here.
Listen, we're going to talk about this. We got to go back to the Confederacy again. Now, I tell all of my guests when they come is that if you just want to go here and see this or go here and see that, then I suggest you call an Uber driver. But now, I'm a tour guide and I'm a history major. So I want you to understand the history behind the old Winters building. And during the
I've got you on shadow. So
okay. During the when the forming of the Confederacy, I think I told you earlier, Jefferson Davis demanded that all government property located in a Confederate state should be turned over to the Confederate government. What I want you to understand about this building, the second floor of this building here, was the telegraph company. Now, I have to get all my young people to understand we didn't have texting then. So we went dab, 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 dab. But it was from this building the telegraph was sent that started the Civil War. That telegraph was to General Beauregard. Now, General Beauregard was the Confederate general, and he had overrun the arson at Charleston, South Carolina. So he was up at Charleston. So President Jefferson Davis had his secretary Beauregard a telegraph, and the telegraph said, now listen, we do not desire needless to bombard Fort Sumter. If Major Anderson, who is the United States representative at Fort Sumter, if Major Anderson tells you the date and time that he will surrender Fort Sumter, and we will not use our gun against him unless he uses his against us. But if this its equivalent is not agreed to, then reduce the fort as your judgment decide to be most practical. Now, I think I started at the bottom, and now let me come back to the front to explain to you. As I said, they had overrun what Jefferson Davis had demanded, that all federal property in a Confederate state be turned over to the Confederate government. They had taken the arson at at Charleston. But there's a military installation called Fort Sumter that's in South Carolina. And so the Confederate government has demanded that the United States government turn over Fort Sumter to them. The Civil War, and it started from a telegraph that was sent from this building here in Montgomery, Alabama. Okay.
There's a request just to look at this sign really quick.
Okay. The other side.
I got it long enough that they can press pause later on and watch it again.
Okay. And please, if you got any questions, feel free to shoot them up there. If I think I told you earlier, if I don't know the answer, I got Chris with me, and he always knows the answer to things.
Folks, when you ask the crowd for a quick fact check or a little, they're on there Googling it for us and telling the rest of us. So it's a real team effort today for us.
That's great. Now, I'd like to focus your attention on this fountain here. This Court Square. Now, if you can pan out far enough, you see it's a circle. It's not really a square. But since they say it's Court Square, we'll go with it. This fountain is located on what was an artesian well. Now, I'm sure that water is not coming from that well at this point. I'm sure that well was capped off. But this fountain is on the site what used to be an artesian well. And Dexter Avenue right behind us here, at that particular time, Dexter Avenue was known as Market Street. And the reason why I want to point that out to you for a reason. When they described what the slave market was, they pointed out that it took place at the artesian well at the foot of Market Street. So here where this fountain is located, this was where the slave market, they sold slaves, enslaved people. They sold enslaved people along with livestock, land, or anything. Here from Court Square, again, it is said that the slave market here in Montgomery was the largest in the South. Again, I'd like to remind you, due to the need for more enslaved labor, because of the richness of the soil in this area, all of the cotton that we could produce, Europe would buy. And just in case I forget to tell you, when the South conceded and fell, there was over 50,000 bales of cotton in warehouses here in downtown Montgomery. And they decided, rather than let them damn Yankees have it, we'll set it on fire. So they set all of the cotton on fire. Well, there was a volunteer brigade of black firemen was able to put the fire out. Well, of course, as they said that the only way they was able to, because they were skilled or anything. So another thing we want you to remember, this was the most, this was the where the auction took place. As I said, they sold enslaved people along with livestock, land, or anything else. Now, I'd like to direct your attention across the street over here. At that particular time, on this side across here was the transfer station. In other words, this is where all of the buses, you don't hardly see any buses on Dexter Avenue now, but all of the buses ran up and down Dexter Avenue going to whatever parts of town it was going to. And everybody got there to either transfer to another bus or catch their initial bus. Now, Rosa Parks right down this side here, I don't know, can you see on that wrought iron fence down the street there? Can you get it? No? Anyway, that was the entry to the
We're crossing this way anyway,
yeah,
right?
mm-hmm, yeah. That was the entry to the Montgomery Fair department store, around there where the wrought iron fence is. And that was where Rosa Parks came, the Montgomery entry to the Montgomery Fair department store, Court Street was there. So obviously she came out of that particular door and came right here to this corner and caught her bus on December 1, 1955. And 2 blocks later, Rosa Parks got down to the corner of Lee Street and Montgomery Street, I believe it is. And on one corner of that street was the Empire Theater. And over on the other side, opposite of that, was the Paramount Theater. And those two theaters, when the bus got to that stop, the bus got crowded because both of the theaters was letting out from their evening matinee. And when they let out from the evening matinee, the bus got crowded. There were some white people standing. Now, one thing I'd like for all of my guests to realize and understand is that Rosa Parks was not violating the segregation laws of that day, because Rosa Parks was sitting in the first row of seats that was designated for blacks. But the bus driver took it on his own. White people were standing, and those days and time, they would make an 80-year-old black woman get up and let an 8-year-old white boy sit down. So the bus got crowded, there was white people standing, the bus driver wasn't gonna have it. He ordered Rosa Parks and the other 3 black people that were sitting on those seats to get up and move to the rear. The other 3 blacks got up and moved to the rear. Rosa Parks just went over to the window, and the bus driver demanded that she get up. She refused. He got off the bus, didn't have a cell phone. The police, and that's where she was arrested. 2 blocks from second traffic light down here where the is red at right now. You got the green light and the red one. That's where Rosa Parks was arrested, 2 blocks after she got on the bus. Now, let me talk to you about something. A lot of people saying that it was planned, it was set up. That's not the case. Rosa Parks had just went to the Folks Holland School in Tennessee. Montego, Tennessee, I believe was where it was. It just burned up a couple of years ago, the building. And in this school, they taught them racial harmony, about integration, how people are supposed to treat you and how you should be treated. And Rosa Parks had gotten a deep lesson in how she should be treated. Now, at the same time, this is December 1955, you got to remember in August of 1955, Emmett Till had been brutally murdered in Money, Mississippi. And Rosa on her mind that day. A lot of people tell us so. She said she was tired. She said she was tired of being treated like a second-class citizen. Not that she was any tired than any other day from her work day. Some people have it said that they had planned this. It was not planned. Rosa Parks said this was spontaneous. It was just the way they had murdered Emmett Till and what she had been taught at the school in Montego, Tennessee, that she just wasn't going to take it any longer. So that's why she refused to give up her seat, okay? Now, Rosa Parks, I want you to understand two things about it. As I told you, she was not violating the segregation laws of that day. The second thing you need to know about it was that Rosa Parks' case did not go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Rosa Parks' case was in state court. She went to court on December 5th. They found her guilty and fined her $10 in court costs. It was on appeal in state court. So therefore, they could not put her case in federal court. Was they to question the constitutionality of the segregated seating on city buses. So there were 4 other black women who had been arrested that year in 1955 for refusing to give up their seats on a Montgomery City bus, and that was the case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court that overturned segregation on city bus. The name of that case, those of you out there that's going to law school, is Browder versus Gale. Ms. Browder was one of the plaintiffs, and her last name started with B, so that's why she was named, and Gale was the mayor of the city of Montgomery. So if you don't remember anything else, remember Rosa Parks was not violating the segregation laws of that day, and Rosa Parks was not Rosa Parks' case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. Again, Rosa Parks was the spark, she was not the. Now lastly, before I take all of your questions, you flood the thing, I want you to flood it out with questions. I want you, if you can pan around at this area here again, it's called Court Square. But I submit to you that this is one of the more historical pieces of real estate in Montgomery. Now I didn't say the most, I said one of the. I got in trouble with that once before with a guest. But you got to remember, the institution of slavery was embodied here. The beginning of the Civil War started here. The beginning of the modern day civil rights movement all started from here in Court Square in Montgomery, Alabama, okay? Now, question people, let's have them.
I got one. Teague, sorry for making you wait so long for an answer. I didn't want to interrupt Jake, you know how it is, man. You guys can understand I don't want to interrupt this guy, but now is exactly the time to be asking the questions as we start to wrap down to the end of our time together. Do not miss this opportunity to talk to this legend, right? But Teague asks, those cobblestone streets, are they original? They look like Europe.
Right here. Streets in Montgomery was cobblestone. Now these right here at Court Square, can you focus in on this rail right here? Montgomery is said to be...
The railing around the
on the street.
Oh.
The rails in the street here.
I see.
Montgomery,
Streetcar rails.
Yeah, Montgomery was supposed to have been the first, now they say the first city in the Western Hemisphere that had those electric trolley cars. But this cobblestone here was done for the, I believe, the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery Voters' Rights March. There's only about 4 or 5 streets that I know of in Montgomery now that is cobblestone, original, okay?
What's that tower up there?
That tower, that's just a microwave or cell phone tower.
That's why we've got such great signal right now. I was wondering why the stream was so good. Right, there's the tower.
yeah. Got another one here. So we're all surrounded by downtown here. But no, this cobblestone is that was done here for the 50th anniversary reenactment of the march and stuff. But there are here in the city of Montgomery that has cobblestone right now. Okay. Any other questions?
Guys, don't embarrass us. Let's hear some questions.
Not that I know the answer, but you can ask them anyway.
Well, I've got a question for the audience. What do you guys think? Do we want to do another tour with Jake down the road? Right? I'm going to need some encouragement. You're gonna need some hearts, some smiles, some thumbs up. Let us know because I think Jake's got a lot of stories to tell, and I'd like to go to Selma with Jake one day soon. So.
And to those of you out there, if you come in this area, I do a one-day tour. I do a three-day, 3-city tours. We'll do Montgomery, we'll do Selma, we'll do Tuskegee. Or we can do a 4-city, 4-day tour with Montgomery, Selma, Tuskegee, and Birmingham. So whatever you need, or if you just want to do a one-day tour, we're here for you, okay?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you guys have questions later on, as well as people, if you're watching this as a video right now rather than live, which is, if you're watching it right now, it's live. Well, that's actually not true, because it might be later on that they're watching it, it's a video. How confusing when you're time traveling, right? Then I and Jake will always go back and make sure we get to questions as well, so that everyone gets answered.
An answer, yes.
How do you feel?
I feel great.
Yeah?
Just looking forward to all your guests coming here, all your viewers coming here to Montgomery. And
I think we've done pretty well. We got a couple people say they want to book with you, and then
Sounds
an
right.
interview with a journalist. It seems like it's been a good day out for us.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Sometimes I have school groups, and I say to the young people, when you get married and get your 4 kids, you bring them back here to Montgomery. Now, the old man, I'll probably be gone then, but still come back to Montgomery. And likewise with you all. Come to Montgomery. If you don't use me as your tour guide, whoever you use, we just want to share your history. And you got to understand, this is just human rights history, and it encompasses all of us. And so, please come.
Totally.
We're a good city.
Well, I'll always say it, that the story of the American, for the fight for the American soul is really the story of the African American. And until there's real equality, then the words in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, it's just a hypocritical piece of paper. So that the journey that your contemporaries and you fought for in the 1960s, which feels like we've backslid a little bit from all the good work you guys did. Well, that's why it's so important for these stories to be told right now, so that way.
And those of you who, especially here in the United States, if you turn on the news this evening in another state, whether it's Georgia or wherever, is trying to roll back rights that was gained through the civil rights. They're trying to restrict our voting rights. It's wrong when we vote, but the fight is on, and it's getting even more of a fight for us, more of a struggle.
Well, thank you for being both the spark and the fire.
Well, I hope so.
All right, guys, let me see if this is a question. No, it's my...
Can you see?
Michelle Sandeman, yeah, it's hard in the light, huh? Michelle Sandeman says she explained about what it was like for a black family, how they could not eat where I could. Never thought we were a different color. Well, thanks, Mom. It's profound. Yeah, I think that's well. All right, here we go. We're gonna wrap it. We've been on for an hour and 41 minutes.
Oh.
That was longer than we would have thought. How long would you have guessed it was?
I don't know. I was in the moment. All
right, can you do me the honor? I don't know if you can see it, but there's an end button up there on the top right-hand corner. If you would press that button for me, that'll end the broadcast. Goodbye, guys. Oh, almost. You see it? It's hard to see here. I got it for you.